Okay, so it's going to be Halloween next week. I don't know what the date is today, the 26th or something. I don't know, 23rd, I don't know. So there's been more Halloween movies, scary movies, and everybody talking about going to haunted houses and all that stuff. When I was a kid, we were all about Halloween, all about trick or treating, Halloween, dressing up, haunted houses and all that stuff. Now I'm an old guy and it's not nearly as important as it used to be. Actually, I hardly celebrate Halloween at all anymore. But I'm sitting in this truck all day and I'm listening to the radio or I'm listening to podcasts on my phone or something. And so I just got done listening to this podcast and it was about this woman that lived in a haunted house. Came to believe that her house was haunted. It bothered her so much she went on for like 3 years being scared to death of the place she lived in. It really wore her to a frazzle. Eventually she moved out of that house. So it got me to thinking about stuff like that happened in my life. So December 1969 I turned 6 years old. Well, that fall before that, October, maybe November, it was the fall. Dark, cold, dark, rainy night. Every Friday and Saturday night, my mom and dad would go to play bingo. They'd go to the VFW and play bingo. Just an excuse to get out, go party and be with their friends and stuff. Well, I'm the baby of 6 kids, so I got 2 older brothers and 3 older sisters. Everybody knew everybody in the neighborhood there on the Near East side of Indianapolis, where I was raised, born and raised over there. So I had some friends. A friend of mine, his older brothers, his older sister and older brother were friends with some of my older sisters. So Friday night they come over, all right, and they were kind of hippies, kind of hip, kind of flower children, kind of hippie kind of people, and they showed up, and he had like a rawhide jacket with the fringe and all that stuff, and she had a poncho and one of them droopy leather hats on, you know, and so they come over to the house, and it's Friday night, and they got a bottle of Boone's Farm wine, and hell, I was like 5 years old, I guess. And so they come over to visit my older brothers, my older sisters, I guess. So they had a seance, all right? 1969, that was the thing. Everybody was doing seances, and they had Ouija boards and all that crap. And like I said, I was 5, so I wasn't. I don't think they were smoking weed, but I think they had this bottle of wine they were drinking, and kind of had cigarettes and stuff, you know. Of course, I was 5. I wasn't doing nothing like that. But I was there observing the scene. So, I guess they did the Ouija board. They did some other stuff. Anyhow, to get to the whole gist of the story here that I'm telling, is they conjured up the image of George Washington on our television set, which was not on. I think they even unplugged it, you know, to prove that there wasn't going to be nothing, you know, in case something happened. I saw George Washington on my television set when I was 5, all right? Wasn't high, wasn't drinking, wasn't doing none of that crap. I was a little kid. I was probably the only sober one in the bunch. Now, they weren't, you know, loaded and drunk and sloppy and all that, but they were really into it. But they somehow conjured up the image of George Washington on our television set. Now, it wasn't the George Washington that you see on the dollar bill. It was that picture of George Washington, you know, the profile of him, the painting you always see. I guess it's in the White House or some museum somewhere. It's got like the water stain across the lower right-hand corner of it or whatever. But that's what I saw on our television set. Like I said, the TV wasn't on. It wasn't in, all right? And like I said, I was just a little kid. And I'm like not a little kid anymore, all right? So I'm like, I'll be 62 in December of this year. This is 2025. So yeah, that kind of freaked me out. kind of stuck with me all these years. And I'm not going to say these people's names because I'm about to tell you another story about stuff that happened in their house. But this house we lived in, my mother and father bought it from their best friends, all right, ever. And that guy's dad, we always called this couple aunt and uncle. I'm not going to use their names either, but it was always aunt and uncle. They were no blood relatives, but they were my mom and dad's best friends, so we called them aunt and uncle. So uncle's dad is where he bought it. They owned the house. We bought the house from them. That old guy was out shoveling the sidewalk in front of the house. This is the story I got. And he come in the house and stood over the register in the living room to get warm. And he stood right there and had a massive heart attack and died. They said he was dead before he hit the floor. All right. So there was always that kind of spook factor going on in our house. All right. Now, I never saw anything. You know, I saw George Washington. I never saw any ghosts or any apparitions or anything like that. But I remember as a kid, I was probably 11, 12 years old, something like that. And I'm laying on the couch in the living room watching TV, and it's late at night. It's 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and everybody's in bed except for me. Well, our dog has got to go outside. We had this dog, and he'd run the neighborhood. He'd go scratch at the door or bark or something. You'd let him out, and he'd go run the neighborhood, go do his business or whatever, and then he'd come back, and he'd bark, and you go open the door and let the dog in. So I'm laying there watching TV, and the dog's got to go outside. All right. So I'm really into this movie, whatever movie I'm watching. I don't remember. It's not important. But it pissed me off, and I got up and let the dog out. All right, in a huff. Slammed the door, and I go back to the couch. Well, there was a chain on the door, like a night latch, and you know, like an extra safety chain, you know, like you see in a hotel room or something. We had one of those on our front door. Well, I let the dog out, I slammed the door, and I go hop back on the couch and get back to my movie. Well, that chain hanging on that door, it was swinging. I mean, it just kept swinging. I mean, it seemed like it was swinging long enough for me to get back up off the couch and go over there and stop it from swinging. And actually put it up on the little hook so it wasn't swinging. But man, I slammed that door, and man, that chain swung for a couple minutes before I finally, it creaked me out enough to get up and go stop the damn thing. And that's a long time, man, you know. Long enough for me to think about it and actually get up and go over there and stop the thing from swinging. So it was probably a couple minutes. And then that dog we had, that was the smartest dog I ever met in my life. But he'd do stuff like he'd be in there messing around or something. He'd just stop and turn and look and stuff like that. You know, there wasn't nothing there, you know. But yeah, just it was kind of creepy, man. But the two teenagers I was telling you about earlier, they lived I lived north of 10th Street and they lived south of 10th Street. But the house that they lived in was like the first house in the whole neighborhood over there. Like it was. The people that owned that house, it was like a farmhouse, and they owned, when all those houses weren't there, it was all fields. It was a farm. It was a big farmhouse, and it had been there since like 1830, 1850, something like that. I don't know. The story was, at one time it was used as a recovery hospital for the Civil War, for like Union soldiers that were injured in war. They would come here for like recovery and stuff. So it was used as a hospital during Civil War times. And at one time it was an orphanage. It was a great big house. Big 2-story house, big old high ceiling. It had like 11-foot tall ceilings and big 9-foot windows and all that stuff. It'd been there a long time. So the girl that I was telling you about, she was a big girl. She was big, tall, heavy set, sweetheart. I really love that woman. She's still alive today. But it was my buddy's older sister. My buddy was the same age as me. He was a big, tall guy too, but he was thin as a rail. He built like a number 2 pencil. So anyhow, he slept in his sister's bedroom. Like maybe the same bed, like she had a big king-size bed or something, I don't know. But he always slept against the wall. In the same bed with her, but he slept against the wall. So anyhow, he tells me this story. He wakes up in the middle of the night and somebody's talking to him. And he wakes up and he thinks it's his mom talking to him. But it was like a ghost. And this ghost was standing on the floor next to the bed, leaning all the way over his sister with its face in his face. And he wakes up and he said, Mom, is that you? As soon as he starts speaking, the ghost kind of runs out of the room. Well, his brother was in the other bedroom over there sleeping, and he heard him talking, so he kind of raised up in bed to see what was going on. And the way you go up the steps, and there's 3 bedrooms, and straight forward was this guy's bedroom. To the right was my buddy and his sister's bedroom. To the left was a room that had like a pool table and stuff in it. So anyhow, when this ghost run out onto that landing, this other guy, his older brother, seen it. It scared the shit out of him. He said, Jesus Christ! As soon as he seen it, he said, Jesus Christ! And as soon as he said that, man, the ghost was gone. Okay? So, that's just one of many stories from that house. Well, like I said, his sister was kind of into that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Kind of like had a friend that was a witch, and they were all into all that kind of spooky kind of seance-y stuff and all that kind of supernatural, spiritual stuff. And so one night they were all sitting in the living room. 2 or 3 people were sitting in the living room. I think they were down there sleeping. That's what it was. They were sleeping in the living room because it was summertime and it was real super hot upstairs. Well, back then everybody left the doors open. You know, you always slept with the door open. You might lock the screen door or something, but the windows were open. Nobody had air conditioning, so the windows were all open, the doors were open and stuff. So anyhow, they were sleeping in the living room. And the brother was sleeping upstairs. We had this wicker rocking chair. It was always in his bedroom. He loved this wicker rocking chair, but nobody ever sat in it because the seat of it was busted out. It was wicker. It was antique. It was older than hell. And he always swore one day he was going to fix it, blah, blah, blah. So anyhow, he wakes up in the middle of the night. Somebody's talking. He hears somebody talking in the room. Well, he looks over at that chair, and there's this spirit, this ghost sitting in this chair trying to talk to him. But it wasn't anything legible. He couldn't, it wasn't making any sense. It was just kind of garbled, kind of noises. It wasn't really any words. And it scared him to death. With these steps going up, there was an old house, so the steps going up to those bedrooms upstairs, it was real super steep flight of stairs. So it scared him so bad he couldn't even speak or holler or nothing. He just started whistling just as loud as he could. And my buddy's sister got up and flipped the light on or something. I can't remember how that went. But they said he come down those steps and he only touched 2 steps during that whole flight of stairs. I mean, he come all the way down. And they said he was standing in the living room and he was shaking and scared. He was scared so bad that he was as white as the white shorts, tidy whitey underwear that he was standing there sleeping. He'd been sleeping in his underwear. Like I said, it was hot. And they said he was as white as the white tidy whitey underwear that he was standing there in that he was wearing. It scared him bad. It scared the shit out of him. So anyhow, she calls her friend, which is a witch. I believe she was a witch. I don't know. Somebody that was really into that stuff. They called her, or this person. I'm not sure who it was. So they're over there at the house, and they got him in the living room there. They're talking and stuff. And she says, you can stand the way the living room, there's like 2 steps that went up into this, where the stairwell was, all right? And it was real narrow steps. It was a real old house. So anyhow, this person says, man, just go over there by them steps. She says, can you feel that presence? And this person said, feel it? Hell, I can see it. And this ghost or whatever it was standing on that landing at the top of those steps, looking down at her, staring down there at her. She said, can you feel that presence? She said, feel it? Hell, I can see it. It's standing right there looking at me. So she had, I don't know, I didn't quite get the whole story. Like I said, I was just a little kid when all that stuff was going on. When that stuff happened, I was probably 12 or 13 years old, I guess, I don't know. But somehow she made a deal with this ghost, said, look, man, you can stay, just don't bother these people. You know, they're not hurting anybody, they're not going to disturb you or anything. And anyhow, supposedly that was the end of that. All right, like they'd never seen or heard from this ghost again. But these guys used to go camping during the summertime, and the whole family would go, and they'd be gone like 2 weeks or something, you know. And they'd come home, and their house would always look like it'd been lived in, like somebody had been staying there or something. And it happened a lot. It happened so much that the 1 year they had the neighbors were all watching the house to see if anybody was coming and going from the house, and the neighbors never saw anybody. There's, you know, we lived on the east side. Hell, them houses were 15 feet apart. I mean, we were all stacked right on top of each other over, you know, the little neighborhood there, you know. And they never saw anybody. But they come home, and sure enough, man, it looked like somebody had been living in their house, man. Stuff had been disturbed, and there were packages of food from the refrigerator that were sitting on the counter and stuff, and but nobody ever saw anybody coming or going. I went by there a few years ago. I've long since moved out of that neighborhood. I moved out of that neighborhood probably, I don't know, mid to late 80s. And then I actually completely moved from that side of town altogether. But the house is gone. They finally tore that house down. And like I said, it was the oldest house. It was the oldest house on the east side, as far as I know, right off East 10th Street there. It was definitely the oldest house in that neighborhood. They used to own all that farmland where Linwood Square is on East 10th Street. That was all farmland, and whoever owned that house, whoever owned that property is the ones that built that house. But yeah, that's, I'm just kind of rambling. I kind of figured I'd put that out there. Everybody's doing, like I said, everybody's got their Hollywood, their Halloween movies going, and like I said, I was listening to this podcast earlier. I'm in this truck all day by myself, so I'm listening to the radio or I'm listening to a podcast or something. That's how I started. I was singing and started telling jokes and stuff, and just kind of trying to entertain myself. I don't know, 18 minutes I've been doing this now, so there's another 18 minutes I got by with. But I was listening to that podcast about this lady had her house, and it's kind of a famous person. I'm not going to use her name. I don't know about copyright infringement and all that kind of stuff, so I'm not going to say who it is, but it's a fairly well-known musical performer. And she was talking about her house being haunted and all that stuff, and got me thinking about all that stuff that's happened to me in my time, and George Washington on the TV set. That was crazy. But yeah, I'm just rambling. But again, if you like my stuff, hit the like button, maybe leave a comment or something, or subscribe or whatever. You can suggest this to your friends or whatever, and if not, that's cool too. But I wish you all the best. Godspeed. Have fun. Be safe. Don't take no wooden nickels. See ya.